Elliott, there's times when you get really excited about an interview, and this is one I am really excited about because I've watched this gentleman for years on Monday Night Football since I'm only 41. I don't remember him playing.
Some of us even watched him play, so I'm equally excited, if not more so.
And I read his book about the 58 championship game, and I could not put it down. It was absolutely fabulous. On the phone, Pro Football Hall of Famer Frank Gifford. How you doing, Mr. Gifford?
Hi, guys. How are you?
Good.
Good. So you're driving from a meeting?
Well, actually, I pulled over, and if the cop comes up and tells me to move, I'll have to move.
Well, David's
it's a beautiful day here. I'm in my home of Connecticut and love it here, and everything couldn't be better.
Well, David's a lawyer, and he specializes in traffic problems. So I don't know if
I've had enough lawyers in my life. Please. Thank you, David.
You worked with a lawyer at one time, and Howard Cosell.
Well, yeah, he was, I guess. He told us he was. I wouldn't want him representing me. Oh, bless his heart. He's gone on to that great gridiron, though.
So, when you went to USC, was USC a big football program back then, or were you one of its first big recruits?
No, actually, there was a Pac-10 at the time, and I think they miscounted. I think there were only 8. But no, USC and California football was always big. I mean, it was big then. We played my senior year. We played Army in Yankee Stadium. We also played Notre Dame in Notre Dame. So I mean, we had a big program.
USC didn't receive quite the coverage back in the day that you can now with cable television and things like that, though.
Well, nothing did, of course. We were in the early days of television. Everything I did early on was in black and white. It was, it was vastly different. These guys today, they play, under a microscope, and not only the way they play, but the way they live. It's a totally different world.
And then you get drafted by the Giants, and then you went from the left coast, to the right coast?
Yeah, I was kind of surprised, and then they called me up. I didn't even know that they were drafting that day, and I got a phone call from Braven Dyer, who was a sports writer for the LA Times. He said, "Well, what do you think about going to New York?" And I said, "Well, I had a great time." And he said, "No, you've been drafted by the Giants." I said, "I don't play baseball." And I was only half kidding because I didn't even know they had a professional team. Quite honestly, I mean, pro football wasn't that big, and I wasn't going to play. I had a pretty good career going. I was doing a lot of stunt work and studying acting, and I was under contract with Warner Brothers at the time, and then I don't know. It just seemed like a good idea. I had been married as a senior, and I thought, well, I'll just go and play one football season, check out New York, and see what it looks like, the Statue of Liberty, and see what the big buildings look like. And here I am. I'm still here, and that was back in 1952.
So, did you end up in any movies?
Yeah, I worked, did a lot of stunt work. John Wayne actually was a football player at USC. And a lot of times the USC was able to recruit players by getting them into the Screen Extras and the Screen Actors Guild. And then on our off days or our vacations, we'd phone in and get jobs. They were making a lot of military movies after the war then. So there was a big demand for soldiers as extras. And it was a good way to augment the income that we did have, which wasn't very much. But I did enjoy it, and so I started seriously getting involved in studying acting. And one time I was under contract with Warner Brothers, and they gave me an ultimatum a few years later to either football or acting. And Mr. Tamara at the time, that year I was the MVP in the NFL, and he gave me a call. And he said, "Look, here's what we'll do. You don't worry about your contract with them. We'll take care of that. You come and be with us." So I'm still here.
So when you started playing with the Giants, I mean, where were you? I saw you play cornerback your first year. Then you moved to offense. Was there a reason that they moved you?
Well, I played both ways at USC. They couldn't figure out, I think what to do with me. But I made my senior year. I went strictly to offense, and we had a pretty good football team. I had a big year and made All-Coast and All-American and all that stuff, and was up for the Heisman. And it was all new to me too. I'd never been in that kind of limelight before. But then I got a phone call. I was on my way skiing up to Baldy Mountain in January of '52, and somebody called me, a newspaper guy, I think it's Braven Dyer, the New York Times, or the LA Times, and said, well, what do you think about being drafted by the Giants? And my first immediate reaction was, I don't play baseball. But it turned out great for me, and I got to know the family, Mara family, and they're still dear friends of mine. I was with Wellington Mara's widow the other night at a big function back here, and it worked out fine for me, and I just wish it could work out the same way for many people, because it really was a happening for me.
What was the transition like from California to New York?
It wasn't all that big a deal. New York is a very small town, really. Just got a lot of numbers, and but if you live in Manhattan, it's only a few miles long and about a half a mile wide, or maybe a mile at the most. And I know the people are very friendly, very warm. It has a great history, and I got deeply involved in that, and I made so many friends, and they've been lifetime friends for me. And I was really blessed. I couldn't imagine what might have happened had I gone to other places. But I was blessed and fortunate that I was in New York.
That 58 championship game, the greatest game ever played, a lot of people said. What was that like?
Well, if I hadn't fumbled a couple of times, it wouldn't have been called the greatest game ever played, because it would have been a wipeout. I fumbled one time on the way in to score. We were in scoring territory at that time. And then I fumbled another time on the way out of scoring territory. So, I mean, I was a big plus for Baltimore that day.
But that was a game that brought the NFL to national prominence.
Yeah, and I'm not kidding about that. It was, there's no question it was. Johnny Unitas, of course, was a legendary NFL quarterback. And think of all the players that did play in that particular game. And, it went down in history as a great football game, and it was that. It was the first game period that ever went into overtime. And of course, we lost in overtime, and that was a historic thing in itself. But it really defined pro football. But more importantly, it was nationally televised, and there had been 2 games that had been nationally televised up until that time. And when they got the ratings in on it, they were astonished at what they were. And they were just incredible, since something like 75 or 80% of the sets in the country in use had been watching that football game. And in particular, the West Coast really got a dose of it, because it went into the later hours. It was a 1 o'clock start, but it went into overtime, so consequently, more sets came into use on the West Coast. And it had a great deal to do with what happened in the entire NFL from that point on in terms of television.
And no one knew about overtime, right? Because it was the first overtime game.
Went into overtime, and like I said, we had the first possession, and it was we didn't get the first down, and we decided to punt rather than going for a 4th down and about a yard on about our own 35 or 40-yard line. I always felt we should have, because everyone was exhausted at that point. And, but it was Johnny Unitas and Raymond Berry teamed up on that kind of memorable drive, if you always have to remember it. But they came down the field, and it was a great performance. And there's no question to me that Johnny was one of the great quarterbacks of all time, and Raymond Berry one of the great receivers, and they put it all together, and that was it.
And then Alan Amici was the guy who went over the goal line with the football, and that was the end of the game.
Yeah, he wasn't bad either. Yeah, and it was because we didn't know quite what happened. And first of all, when we ended up tied, we didn't know what to do, and they didn't either. And the officials actually didn't know how to go about it. So they didn't know how much time we would have before they would kick off for the overtime, or do they flip a coin, which they ultimately did, as to who would receive first, and we did receive, and it was one possession by us and then one possession by them, and then again they scored Amici from about the 2-yard line, and that was that.
I think what's amazing is Gino Marchetti was out. He was in the locker room listening to the game on radio. He had the ball boy going back and forth, and I heard after the game that Amici gave the ball to Marchetti. Marchetti put the ball in his closet for years, and then he gave it to the Italian-American Sports Hall of Fame here in Chicago. And the NFL Hall of Fame wanted that ball for years, but they can't get it.
Well, maybe they can make a deal with him. But I so vividly remember that play, the 47 power. I carried the ball on a 3rd down and about a yard, and I always had claimed, you couldn't make a big deal out of it because Gino Marchetti broke his leg on that play. There was a big pile up at the line of scrimmage, and I was fairly positive. I didn't even look over the yard markers that I'd made the first down. But when the referee came running in and grabbed the ball, and Marchetti was screaming like a panther, and the bone actually was coming, had protruded to his leg, and he was very seriously hurt. And so they were unpiling everything, and they never bothered to where they marked the ball. And years later, I talked to a couple of the officials who were involved in it, and they felt the same way. We didn't get a fair mark on it. And I've been playing football a lot of years at that point, and when I turned the corner and turned it upfield, I had a good block. I broke it back into the inside, and to this day, I think I made the first down. I'm not going to make a big issue out of it, and I didn't at the time because it would have looked like just sour grapes. I knew they weren't going to change it, but I've said it, and I've written about it, and I felt that I did have the first down. Now, whether or not we would have gone in to score or to kick a field goal, I don't know. But at least it would have been a different kind of an outcome, I think, from that point on.
If Art Donovan tells a story, it'd be completely different.
Who does?
If Art Donovan tells a story, he'll expand on it.
Art was great. I mean, Art is a big old punchy guy sitting over there. But I'll tell you come up to the line of scrimmage and look over to see those guys. You see Artie Donovan and Gino Marchetti, and they were a great football team. If you think about it today, what do we have? 32 franchises playing football.
Right.
Yes.
And 50-man rosters or whatever the heck they are. At the time, there were 12 teams that played, and we had like 33-man rosters. So all the good players were being used, and there was none you had to have just to fill out a roster. I mean, it was in Baltimore is one of the great. When you go down their lineup, and I won't bother doing it right now, but I mean, like I mentioned several of them, they were unbelievable, and I feel the same way about our backfield. Alex Webster and myself, we both made many Pro Bowls. Charlie Connolly, our quarterback, was a great quarterback. We had great personnel, and it just wasn't as diluted as it has become over the years.
And you had a pretty good defensive unit as well.
Well, they were the best. Tom Landry, of course, was a player coach at the time. He went on to become a Hall of Fame coach with the Dallas Cowboys. Sam Huff was in the middle, Harlan Savari, just extraordinary guys. And it was a memorable game, and I think it helped define pro football as as having arrived, if you will, in the eyes of the public.
I talked to Bob Avellini last year, and he mentioned to me that when the Giants needed a new coach after your coach retired, that they picked the wrong coach. You had Lombardi as an assistant coach and Landry, and they picked someone completely different, and they said they had two great coaches, and I don't know why they went in the direction they did.
They picked Jim Lee Howell, if that's
yes.
who you're talking about.
Right.
But they hadn't. Lombardi hadn't been there. I think he had been there a couple of years, and Landry, of course, was still playing. So, arguably, I always felt the same thing. And I was surprised that Mr. Mara, Wellington Mara, made the big decision on that. I'm surprised that he made that move, but I think he felt that he could take Jim Lee Howell, who knew little or nothing about the game of football, but he was a disciplinarian. He had been, I think, a major or something in the military, and we had a bunch of guys who were, I wouldn't want to use the word wild, but they bordered on it. A lot of returning servicemen. And guys that they were tough to discipline. So I think he looked at it that way. Jim Lee Howell, a military veteran himself, could handle these guys much better than Lombardi, who was right out of Fordham, where he'd never been a head coach. Tom Landry was a player coach. So I think he made the move just for those reasons. And of course, you're right. Mr. Lombardi went to Green Bay and put together a Hall of Fame career. Tom went to Dallas, and he put together a Hall of Fame career down there.
How did you know when it was time to get out of playing?
My head hurt. No, I didn't want to hang around like a lot of guys I had seen hang out. More than that, I started working. Right after 1958. My last season was well after that. But I mean, in 1958, I started working in local television. I did local news. when it was a new thing on television. I had a network radio show that I shared with Phil Rizzuto, and I knew what I was going to do. I had a place to go. A lot of guys at that time, like I said, had returned from the military, and when they left football, they really didn't know what they were going to do. I knew what I was going to do, and I couldn't wait to do it. And I played enough. I played 12 years. And there was we were changing coaches again. We had a coach at the time who had replaced Jim Lee Howell, and that was Allie Sherman. And he was a disaster. And not personally, but I mean, he arrived with the football team just coming apart. Guys were retiring, guys didn't like him, and I could see that too. And I knew when it was time to get out.
You had this serious head injury, knocked you out for over a year. What do you think about what's going in NFL now with concussions?
Well, I keep trying to tell people I had a spinal concussion. And it wasn't until years later, they didn't have the CAT scan in 1960 when I got that famous hit by Bednarik, and I'm lying on my back in the field. And it's still, I think, at a postage stamp in Philadelphia. But it's in retrospect, and I've looked into it. Of course, years later, I started getting a lot of numbness and tingling in my arms. And I went in at the time, and by then they had the CAT scan, and I went in to see a specialist. And it was even the technician that did the CAT scan. And I came out of the CAT scan. He said, "Well, were you ever in an automobile accident?" And I thought, no, but Bednarik wasn't a car, but it was. I had multiple fractures of vertebrae in my neck, and it's just a good thing I decided to take a year off, because had I gone back and tried to play, it might have been much worse than it was. But I took that year off, and everything healed up, and people remember me only as getting hit at that point. But I came back and played 4 more years. I went to the Pro Bowl again as a wide receiver. So I mean, that did not define my career. It was a dramatic thing that people kept replaying over the years, and I think, like I said, it was on a postage stamp in Philadelphia.
But here, you did some damage to Bednarik too, though, because you knocked some of his screws loose.
I'm not going to go there.
What was your favorite position playing?
I just loved to play. I really did. I played a bunch of years as a defensive back, and I doubled up a couple times in a couple of years as both a defensive back, offensive back. I was a tailback really in the single wing when I came out of USC. I made All-American as a tailback, and I could run, I could pass, I could block, I could catch. And for several years, I was our leading receiver and our leading rusher with the Giants. So, I mean, I love to play football. I mean, I don't think I would have had the kind of career that I had were I playing today, because everything is so specially oriented. And I just love to play.
I saw you on TV several years ago when Dandy Don Meredith died on Monday Night Football, and you talking about him. It brought a tear to my eye. It seems like you two are really close.
He was the best of friends. He really was. He was an incredible guy. We got to know each other on Monday Night Football, and we stayed friends after that. He's a one of a kind, and he lived, far too short a life. And the parking enforcer is telling me I got to move.
Thank you so much for your time. It was a pleasure talking to you.
Yeah, you want to talk to my cop?
I'll talk to the cop.
You guys on the radio? Yeah, you guys talk to the guys in Chicago. They're on radio.
I'm about to give Frank Gifford a ticket, guys. No, he's all right.
Well, we don't want you to do that.
No, we're not going to do that. We're not going to do that. You take care now.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, brother.
Everything's good. Thank you. I bet you haven't had that happen.
No, that's the first.
I don't think David has his Connecticut law license either. So
no, I don't.
No, he's actually a Giant fan, so we got lucky.
Are there any Jet fans?
In Greenwich, I don't think so.
So
Greenwich is kind of posh.
So who was the better broadcaster on the team? You or Kyle Rote?
Well, Kyle could have done anything he wanted to do. He was a dreamer. He was an artist. He was a remarkable person, and he would have been an unbelievable football player. But he actually limped to a career that people still remember. But then he was, he's fantastic when he was at SMU, and he was one of the people that inspired me to go into professional football because I happened to be listening on radio after I was coming down from a mountain outside of L.A. after a skiing trip. And when Kyle wrote and SMU was playing Notre Dame, and he had, and it was the most fascinating radio call I've ever heard. And then he was drafted number 1 by the Giants the year before I was drafted number 1, and he got hurt that season in training camp. And so they were going to play me on defense. So that was the reason I went over to the offense, and because Kyle had tore his knee up and never did recover from that. But he limped through a pretty long career with the Giants. They made the Pro Bowl a couple of times, and God only knows what he would have been had he not torn that knee up before his first football game.
What was Howard Cosell like?
Howard Cosell was okay. He was kind of a it was a brilliant man. He really was. He had a great mind. He had his name was really Howard Cohen. At the time, he felt there was great prejudice against him coming into the broadcasting world. He was defensive about everything, and Lord knows he might have been right about a lot of things at that time in this point in history. And he could be very difficult, but in some things he was brilliant. He had a remarkable memory. He had a way of interviewing that few people did. It was more of an interrogation. And he arguably was one of the first people who, at least in radio and television, wasn't kissing up to somebody when they interview him. Howard just, he asked the questions that other people wanted to know the answers to. So one of the first people to do it.
So you were like the traffic cop.
Now you all do it.
Yeah, you were like the traffic cop in the booth between Meredith and Cosell then.
At times, but I never felt that way. I've heard that over the years. Don, like I said, he became one of my dearest friends, and we lost a real beauty in him. But he didn't miss much, I can tell you that, on the way out.
Your son's following your footsteps, I see, in acting and also playing football at USC.
Yeah, I talked to him this morning. I'm not quite sure what he's doing, but he sounded like he was having a hell of a time doing it. And I've always encouraged him to do that. You know what he really is? And I've heard this too about him being an actor, football player, and all that. He actually is on the dean's list, a straight-A student at USC, majored in the film school, and he didn't get that from me. He earned that in every way, and I am just so proud of him.
How did he convince his mom to let him play football?
She didn't know. I didn't know. I didn't even know he'd gone out for the team. Pat Hayden, the athletic director, called one day, and Pat and I remained friends over the years. And when he played with the Cardinals years ago, and I played at USC, and then worked his way through a lot of different areas at USC, and is now the athletic director. Well, he called me and to tell me that sorry about Cody, he had sprained his ankle. And I didn't even know he was playing football. And I said, well, how did he do that? And why are you calling me? And he said, well, Cody actually, he got piled up in me, and I had not known he was even out for the team. But he did. He made the varsity and made it again, and he's going to stay an extra semester, even though he's got a job with a film company. He's going to stay another semester because he has that one semester that he missed. That one season that he missed, he has that eligibility remaining, and he's going to stay, and he'll be playing this fall.
Who's tougher on him, you or your wife?
None of us. He's a great kid. Gosh, we could never have asked for anyone, for anyone to turn out better than he did. He's also 6'4" and about 225 pounds, and he's a fine athlete. But I'm even much more proud of he's won every academic award they've got out there, and I'm just so proud of that.
Will there ever be a time where Monday Night Football will be what it once was, when it was destination television, and it was something special?
I don't think there is destination television anymore, unless it's a moon launch or something like that. There's just too much out there, and everything seems so focused now, if you will. There's nothing that crosses over the demographics and reaches out to an entire country like Monday Night Football did. A lot of people tuned in to watch it. because they'd never heard anyone like Howard. A lot of them wanted to see what Don was going to do to puncture that balloon, that arrogant guy that was on TV. They didn't even know what football was about. Some people tuned in to watch the game itself, but there was so much that surrounded it. There'll never be a circumstance like that again, because everything is covered in ad infinitum today. I mean, gosh, if there's anything going on, you've got, you just go to any press conference and look out there and see a sea of cameras, and they're all going somewhere. It's just a world of difference. But as I've said many times, we had the best of times. We really did.
I love you and your wife. When your wife left the Regis and Kathy Lee show, I was so sad. I could never accept Kelly. You two are like the perfect couple. I really liked the episode of Coach when you were on there and Jerry Van Dam, or Luther Van Dam, Jerry Van Dyke, spilled the food all over you and Kathy Lee. That was hysterical.
I'd forgotten all about that reminder. No, she's done great. She loves the gig now she's doing on the Today Show, and she and Hoda they're a scream. They really are. I don't know whether you watch them now, but they're funny as hell. They really are. They're having a great time.
Yeah, I keep waiting for those two to have their own reality show.
Well, I tell you, people are climbing all over. They do a lot of things, and they just both of them been there and done that, and they bring something to television that you have a hard time finding, and that is a real pleasure in doing it. And they get along just like they do on the air. They really adore each other and have great respect for each other, and they're a remarkable pair.
Thank you so much for your time. It was a pleasure talking to you.
Okay, good luck, guys.
All right.
Thank you.
Don't get any tickets.
No, I think I know that guy.
Sounds great. That was legendary broadcaster, NFL Hall of Famer Frank Gifford.